Writing a compare and contrast or comparative essay. The learning intention for this video is to identify the key words and structures required to complete a comparative essay. And the success criteria for you is, I'm aware of different structures and I can select the one most suitable for my assessment task. So firstly, what is a comparative essay? A comparative essay asks you to compare at least, but perhaps more items. So this could be 2 positions on an issue, 2 theories, 2 texts, or 2 events. Most commonly for English, you'll be looking at 2 texts. And of course, this can be a film, a comic, a novel, a play. Any text could be studied. So firstly, let's start with the key definitions. Compare as a noun means to estimate, measure, or note the similarity or dissimilarity between 2 things. The verb means to differ strikingly. Contrast, however, as a noun means the state of being strikingly different from something else in juxtaposition or close association. And juxtaposition and close association are also synonyms you could use instead of contrast within your essay. And the verb again is to differ strikingly. So though your choice will become pretty clear, you do arbitrarily have 2 options when you begin your essay. You can choose to write either a comparison essay, which is the similarities and the differences, or simply a contrast essay, which would focus only on the differences. But I think it should be pretty obvious that you'd want to be choosing a comparative essay, as a contrast essay really narrows down the focus you could choose for your essay. But this is something to consider based on the sort of preparation you do for this essay. If you think a contrast essay would allow you to speak more precisely and limit your options, that might also be something you want to consider. So the first thing to do before you even look at what essay structure you might choose is to develop a large list of similarities and differences. So once you know your basis for comparison, think critically about all the similarities and all the differences for the 2 things. And there's a million ways to do this, including a whole range of visual organisers. And this will probably be the bulk of what you do in class time, creating different forms of comparison and eliciting different responses to this. But since this is more focused on structure, there are many different ways to write a comparative essay structure. All of them will have an introduction and a conclusion, and that's important, but they will not necessarily have 3 body paragraphs in the middle. So of course, intro and conclusion is still very important and isn't something you should overlook. And keep in mind, an intro and a conclusion is in all of these different models we're going to look at. Okay, so let's take a look at the options. So there's 7 options, and I've ranked them in order from easiest to hardest. So option 1 is whole to whole, and it's the easiest of all. You simply have 4 paragraphs, an intro, text 1, text 2, and a conclusion. The advantages are it's easy, clear, has clearly differentiated paragraphs, but the big disadvantage is that you may fail, and there's no clear guide for the ideas to be discussed in each text. There's also limited scope for comparison built into the structure, so you're going to have to find a way that you're going to smush comparison into what is just a simple 2-paragraph essay. Option 2 is point by text, and it's the easiness scale is 2nd. So you can see we've got introduction, text 1, point 1, point 2, point 3, text 2, point 1, point 2, point 3, and then a conclusion. So what the points are is entirely up to you, but it may be things like plot, character, theme, motifs, anything you choose. And you talk about text 1 in isolation and then text 2 in isolation. And again, this isn't necessarily a good form. So the advantages are there's some guidance for ideas, it allows you freedom to select your own ideas, and there's 2 clearly delineated paragraphs. The disadvantages and risks are of course challenging to compare within the structure, so you'd have to really plan it out so the points were identical and find a way, perhaps in the linking sentences, to make some comparison. And the other risk is that these can become overly long. Option 3 is similarities to differences, and on the easiness scale this is the 3rd out of 7. So the structure looks like this: introduction, similarities, differences, conclusion. The advantages is it's very clear to write, there's very simple categories. And the disadvantages are that it can become very jumbled and confusing because you've got a whole bunch of similarities from 2 different texts followed by a whole bunch of differences between 2 texts. Option 4 is compare and contrast across categories. So the structure may look like this, but of course you can choose the categories yourself. But so we start introduction, characters, themes, plot, conclusion. The advantages are it's very prescriptive, it's very clear, and it guides your ideas. The disadvantages is that it can be limiting in that you can't include things beyond the categories, but of course since you're choosing the categories, that allows a fair range of scope. The disadvantage is lastly, doesn't allow for other more complex ideas. Option 5 is 1 text at a time, which looks like this: introduction, text 1 and 2, text 2, conclusion. So here you have space to discuss the text in isolation, but also in comparison. The advantage is, of course, there's a clear place left for comparison and each text is covered. But it's not an entire compare and contrast essay in that you're talking about text 1 and text 2 in isolation as well as in comparison. But as you get better at writing essays, you really want to be comparing and contrasting throughout. The disadvantages, of course, paragraph 1 and 3 encourage you to retell rather than analyse the things you're talking about. And there's minimal guidance in regards to the ideas that you could put in here. Option 6 is alternating text. So you go intro, text 1, text 2, text 1, text 2, text 1, text 2, conclusion. And the advantage is, of course, and this is the type of structure you want to be aiming to become good at writing, is that everything is being compared within each paragraph. So you're using your meta-language as often as possible, and you're inserting the two texts side by side within each paragraph. Another advantage is it follows a traditional 5-paragraph structure, which will make it a little bit easier for you to recall where linking sentences go and so on. The disadvantages is that it can become confusing without clear topic sentences, so make sure you spend a special amount of time fine-tuning your topic sentences, and also it requires a great deal of preparation. So option 7, side by side by idea, and again on the easiness scale this is 7th, so it's the most difficult. And this is just a slight variation on option 6. So we go introduction, idea 1, text 2, idea 2, text 1, text 2, idea 3, text 1, text 2, then conclusion. And the advantage is, of course, it allows significant depth, and also it allows you to select what ideas you want to base your essay writing on, and it lends itself to a clear planned response, which is, of course, also a disadvantage in that it requires a lot of research and a lot of preparation. And also it requires a great deal of flexibly used meta-language, because you will be using the meta-language and your meta-linguistic phrases very often to combine all these different ideas and these different texts side by side in a meaningful way. So remember, if you're unsure as to what structure you should follow, ask your teacher, or if your class is following one set structure, just use that. But this guide has provided you with an overview of all the different possibilities, and of course the idea is that you would move from option 1 to option 7 by the time you're completing the assessment. If you were to submit, say, option 4 in an essay, you'd probably be limiting your horizons in a sense, and that there's minimal comparison within 1, 2, 3 and 4 options. But it's important to build the skills on your way there, so at least you can talk about the text firstly, and then you can write a full comparison, which is option number 7 by the end. Also, you might want to seek out guidance from your teacher as to what sort of level you're up to in terms of your understanding of the texts and the ability to analyse things, and you want to be moving up the scale as you go through. So of course ask your teacher if you're unsure. Alright, so in the comment to this YouTube video, so you need to be logged in of course, I want you to write what you think, which of these structures do you think could be removed or combined. So maybe option 3 and 4 are worth looking at, you could combine them, maybe some you think, since I've clearly said some of them won't allow you to do exactly what the task requires and will limit your ability to get a good mark, tell me which ones you think could be removed or combined. Good luck with your comparative essays.